Let's look at slashes now. Slashing will occur when there's an actual edge is present. Unlike shanks that by definition are improvised poking weapons, anything that has an edge can be used to slash. Now this is really important, and you need to have this kind of training, because statistically, if you have some kind of improvised weapon where an edge is present, the attacker is 80% of the time likely to attack with a slash. If you can't defend the slash, you're in real trouble. Let's look at some of the defenses. All right, let's look at slashing attacks. Obviously, if you're dealing with a box cutter, he really only has a slashing component. But statistically, it's important to realize that with an actual knife, maybe a piece of cutlery, or somebody's able to get access to a real knife, although that's not really a spontaneous attack, even under those conditions where you have a proper fixed blade, 80% of the time the attack is still a slash. It's important to understand that most martial arts schools spend a lot of time on the thrust, but many of them, including Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, did not have adequate slashing defenses, which statistically is way, way more common. Now, if he is close enough to slash my neck, again, I'm probably going to be affected by the flinch reflex, and I'm going to have to cover it the same way as I do a punch or a glassing. As we talked about, many people, some studies quote as high as 70% of people who've been attacked by edge weapons didn't realize that they were attacked by knives or edge weapons. That's really high. So once again, I may simply not know that there is a knife in his hand. The angle that it travels at is very similar to a punch or to a glassing. So it's important to make sure that you optimize your flinch reflex. You need to bury that chin down as far as it can go, and you need to bring those shoulders up as high as you can go. And really squeeze your head in between your shoulders and cover this area. For a punch, you're covering the chin, which is the worst place to get hit. And for a slash, which you may not know the difference under the conditions that we talked about, particularly if we add poor light to that. So when he slashes at me, this alone can save me. You can see that he opened up my shoulder, but it wouldn't have hit my neck. Now, if I had the more common flinch reflex, oh man, I just gave it to him, and that's my head rolling along there. So this flinch reflex alone can save me. It traveled up my shoulder, hit my head, would have opened my scalp up. They can stitch me back together, but my chin was down, my shoulders are up. Now, when I add my arm position to this, again, we have a pretty functional defense. And if I have any inkling that this was an edge weapon, man, I want that combat Osotogirian bust his head like a melon on the cement, because you don't want him to have another chance to stick that in you or slit your throat. The problem is, unlike a punch, which an untrained person needs the distance to gain momentum, a slash can be done from the wrist. It's traveling the same kind of arc, but it's tighter and faster. That's when this kind of flinch is going to save your life. I may not have time to get my hands up. And again, we cover it the same way. Overhook this arm, get in tight, clothesline him, or smash on his chin. You can get your thumb in his eye at the same time as I move his head, and then kick that leg out. And pow! That's the same kind of way that your flinch response is going to force you to defend against a slash high. All right, now we're going to look at the slash to the body. We were talking about how a flinch reflex can either help you or hurt you. And an optimized flinch reflex can be the difference between life and death when it comes to a slash to your throat. Now let's look at the body attack. I'm not sure if I would go as far as to call it a flinch reflex, but it's very common, and I've seen it again and again when I look at live surveillance footage and real fight video of someone who's been hit in the body, usually with an implement or a punch or something when kids are playing around. They have the same kind of flinch to cover their body. Their hips might suck back a little bit and their arms cross. Using that same kind of instinctive flinch response, but this time against the body, we're going to build a defense around that, what I call a crosata, which is just a crossed arm. It's really efficient, and through these studies and live, full speed, full contact simulations that we've done, it's by far the most efficient slash defense that I've come across and designed in all my years in the martial arts. So the idea is, as he slashes, I'm going to use two hands to defend here. This one is going to intercept the arc of the cut. So it's just sticking out naturally from this flinch response. Now the second hand is going to be doing the same thing as we did earlier, trying to take the steam off of that arm by slapping down at the bicep or the shoulder. The difference is I'm going to be using the cross hand. So as he slashes at me, he's going to be doing this kind of action again. Okay, you see it's the same idea. I'm using that hooking, cupping idea. That doesn't work very well, you can see with this hand. But when I combine the two, you're going to have a good defense. So depending if I'm early, on time, or late, this hand is going to hit somewhere between the shoulder and the bicep, maybe even the wrist if I'm very, very late like this. So this one is more or less passive. It sticks out and prevents the arm from getting closer. At the same time, my hips are going to go back if I'm late, and I'm going to take the steam off. Now from here, I wrap this arm up. Now sometimes it's going to end up in this position because the elbow got pointed down, and sometimes you're going to be able to roll that elbow up. This is the most efficient way because it breaks his posture, puts his back at that bad 90-degree angle that we talked about in the unarmed attack portion, and I've got a host of different locks that I can do on this elbow. So I've got control of him mechanically. I've got joint locks here, so I don't necessarily have to work against the blade and disarm him. I can either break the arm or take him to the ground. So now if I get this far, but I can roll his arm over, maybe it was knees, maybe it was pressure, I end up in this position here. His wrist is caught in the crook of my arm. This is acting as an upward force here. Now I can do this with my hands cupped. You have a lock here, but a stronger way is to actually lock your hands like this in a gable grip so that the bone of my forearm is digging in here like this. This is very strong, and I can put him on the ground like this. Get it. Now at this point, one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to be pushed onto his side, but in this case, the second thing, his arm is starting to bend a little bit. So from here, like I talked about earlier, we go to a shoulder lock. However, if I'm able to keep this arm bent like this, I can just force him, straight. I can force him onto his side and end up in this control position like this, where I can break his elbow this way, and I have good bargaining position from here. Now once I get this out, I can also go to that same control position that is so standard, so classic in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right here. Again, I can use the street version that helps me keep my hands open, and maybe I can start giving him a facial or a shave or something, because obviously you can see the advantage position that I have maintained here. Now in this case, his elbow bent inside. Pull your arm out. I have to use two hands here. This is not good control, and I'm in danger of losing control here, but I have a last ditch attack here. This is one we developed through live, full contact, full speed simulations, because many times we weren't getting the optimal grip. So let's take a look at that one. So when I go here and his arm bends, I gotta use the bone of my wrist to hold this very tight. Very similar to that wrist lock that we did in the unarmed section. In fact, there's a possibility that I can put a wrist lock on the guy here and then, oops, I'm sorry about that. I never actually touched the weapon. So that's possible. From the same thing, I need to either take him out with this or at least get him thinking about his own weapon so that while he's worrying about this, I can then switch to a different grip. But this is very common that you're going to end up controlling at just the wrist. Now this method of slash defense, which I refer to as a cruzada, has become popular over the last few years. I've been doing it 15, 16 years, and I developed it from a couple of different sources. So I'm certainly not claiming I invented this, but I've been doing this a long time, and now I see a lot of people teaching it. When I see it taught, most of the time, they leave out a key element that I want to really make clear to you. Stay in one place, but start slashing back and forth. You can see on camera that the part that's moving the fastest is his wrist. Now look at his elbow. It's moving, but it's not moving that far, and it's not moving that fast. And the part that's moving the least is his shoulder. So this is really important with dealing with slashes. If I'm sitting here like this, trying to grab his wrist, you can see how problematic it is. That's the part that's moving the fastest. Yes, it's carrying the weapon, but I need to control his whole limb, not just his wrist. That's one of the problems with old style edge weapon defenses is that we're focusing too much on the wrist. This is possible, but man, you're more likely to get sliced up. So when you start slashing, look, I can get to that shoulder really easily, but it's going to be very difficult for me to get to that wrist. So I have to realize that my defense is about getting to that shoulder and sliding down the arm. Many people advocate you start pumping knees into the guy like this. That's great, but in the real world, it's a lot more difficult than we realize for the same reasons we talked about in the unarmed defense section. The problem is when two people are jostling around and he's trying to pull this arm up with all his might, my weight is constantly shifting from foot to foot. At any moment, if I do this, my grip is going to become weaker. So it's certainly not impossible. It just isn't a Hollywood movie where the stuntman's going to stand here and let me repeatedly knee him. Out of the two, what I'm trying to say here is out of the two things, trying to knee the guy or keeping control of his delivery system, which do you think is more important? By far, keeping control of the delivery system. Here's the single most important drill to help people understand one of the founding concepts of this corsada type defense. Have the knife, or in this case me, stay stationary. You can add footwork later, but it's a level of complexity that's just going to confuse things right now. And I just want to slash back and forth without any particular rhythm, whatever. Now the first idea, and it helps if you have a stopwatch, but it's not that hard. Pick a segment of time, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever, and just count how many times you can hit your wrist. It's not that easy because this is the part that's moving. Then we do the next drill at the elbow. See how many times you can hit your elbow. Now I'm not trying to make him miss. Remember, we're trying to get a baseline. Okay, now he's batting about 70, 80%. He was probably what? About 10% on the wrist, about 70, 80 at the elbow. Now he's gonna hit my shoulder. Okay, so he bats 100%. That's the key drill, to have people try to move the different parts. Now, by hitting my shoulder and keeping contact, he can slide his hand down to my wrist without losing. Just use one hand and slide your hand down my arm. Okay, now he got about 70% down. Do it again. Now slide all the way down. This time he got about 85%. That's the next part of the drill. So that's how you end up getting wrist control, is by starting on the part that isn't moving and sliding down. This can be used this way with your blocking arm and this way with your support hand. Really good drill. You do it back and forth. Do it in rounds for a couple of minutes. It's going to give you the sensitivity and also ingrain the concepts behind here that I shouldn't be sitting here trying to track his wrist. I'm just going to get cut. I need to look here and see the knife in my peripheral vision if I can, and then the timing is right. Now, faster? No, just stay static. Right now I want to think about entering when I see that knife go back. So now I'm using these two concepts. All I'm trying to do is enter my arm at the end of his slash cycle. So I'm now not trying to track his wrist so much, but the arc of his knife with my peripheral vision. My main vision is here so I can see. So as he goes back and forth, I can see when his arm goes to my left. And it's fairly easy to get in. That time I mistimed it, I'm talking in the middle of it, and I can get in here. Now from here, remember, you can then start integrating your locks. That's the most important drill for the corsada slashing defense. It's going to teach you the most important concepts, give you a way to drill them efficiently with a minimum of time and a much shorter learning curve. See you in the next lesson.